Well, cool. Well, I tried to put together a couple of items to sort of
Yeah,
go over that might be helpful.
I'd be interested, Chris, like what stuff is top of mind for you guys? What are you guys like? What is?
I mean, everything we do now is about the supply chain. And so we're coming from the buy side. And I think we're getting pretty good there. Always, more to do, more to learn. But I think we've got, a pretty good approach on the buy side. And what's new is trying to bring what we've learned from the buy side to help publishers as well. And so we're not experts on the sell side of the market. We're very much, still learning. But, the whole thing is supply chain. We feel like we can be really uniquely good at helping buyers and sellers understand how to navigate the programmatic supply chain effectively. And, we're trying to do what's done successfully on the buy side and now bring it to publishers as well.
We should talk. All right. I always do this. That was great. That's great. We need to keep the conversation going from that. Eric, do you want to do our intros or?
We could just roll.
We're rolling. This is the rolling start. The rolling start was from the answer you just gave to now. All right. Well then, let's at least give the man a proper intro. Chris Kane, are you a founder, CEO? What is your title for Jounce?
I'm the founder of Jounce Media.
That must be great to say. So Chris, you and I have been on another podcast together in a prior life. It felt like it was was it early in Jounce or was that?
It was. I was thinking about this today. I don't exactly remember when it was, but you were asking some like pretty basic questions. I'm like, what does Jounce do? And I had to think on my feet. Like, I don't know what we do. I have no idea. I'm still figuring it out. I'm slightly better at it now. But yeah,
you just gave a very solid pitch right there. And plus, if I remember at the time, you were sub 10 people. And now
we still are. We're still a really small team. It's only 6 of us.
Really?
But we think we're getting a lot done with 6 people.
Yeah. You guys have made a bit of an impact. 2019 was a hell of a year for you guys.
It was a good year. 2020 is going to be a good year too. I think what's changed is we would still call ourselves a consultancy, but we're not really doing PowerPoint work anymore. And
try that
as
again.
we started to move away from this, much.
I'll edit this part out, but yeah, try that again. So you guys are not you said.
Do I have like a spotty connection or something?
Yeah, it's fine though. You said we're not a consultancy anymore, so go from there.
Yeah, I mean, what really is different is that we're not a consultancy anymore, or we are a consultancy. We still call ourselves a consultancy and we still do consulting work, but we don't do it in the way that we used to. We don't really write many PowerPoint slides anymore. We're not doing pure strategy work. We're investing a lot of our time in building a data asset, and then we're helping marketers and publishers and tech companies make better decisions about how they buy ads or sell ads based on the data asset. And so anyway, that's like a very roundabout way of saying, I think we're getting better at being much more productive than we used to be because we're not doing highly custom things for each client. We're investing in one data asset and then using it over and over again.
How have you guys seen the conversation around SPO shift over the last 12, 18 months? Because I feel it was a thing that had been talked about broadly, or that people were like kind of aware of generally what people were going for, but it feels like it has become a much more specific thing and now means different things to different people, but like for specific purposes. Like not that that's a bad thing. It's that like what SPO means for a brand marketer might be different than an agency, might be different than a DSP.
I wish I didn't agree with what you said, too. It's not a well-defined category, which is a problem. We need to get aligned. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about supply path optimization? So I have an opinion, which we can maybe come back to. But anyway, the thing that's changed is sellers.json. That was a huge unlock for helping everybody in the supply chain understand the supply chain.
Right.
And it was a huge unlock for our business. We had been doing all this research for, more than a year in advance of sellers.json, we had all these like weird things we would see in the supply chain. Like there are these, whatever, the details don't matter. The point is like there were all these like mysterious things that we'd been seeing for a long time. And then exchanges started to roll out sellers.json data. Like that explains it. Now we understand that these paths all sell the same thing, or these ones all transact through Google Open Bidding, or these paths are all alike in a certain way. And it explains why we've been observing certain data. So it was a big unlock for us. It was a big unlock for a handful of DSPs. It's a big unlock for the exchanges who like now have much better understanding of what their competitors are selling. So I view that as a really significant turning point in SPO.
Was there anything, what to you was the most surprising then, once you guys finally started digging into these sellers.json files? And like what, you said it like connected a few dots for you. What were those dots?
Well, I think there are really two things. The most significant one is how incredibly widespread reselling is. To give you just like a point of reference, one of the things that we always do when I work with a marketer is bring in all the data that they have from their DSP, join it up with our data set, and build a map for them of where their money goes. Just a starting point, like what are you buying? And you know, what you're buying doesn't mean like what exchanges, you've always known that, but like what lives behind those exchanges? And what we're doing one of these right now, so the numbers are top of mind. Video on web and app, for this particular marketer, this is common, more than 75% of the inventory they buy is resold. That's not all bad, but it's huge. Like I thought reselling was like, oh, there's this like finally fringe activity called reselling, which we should probably learn more about. But mostly we're optimizing direct to publisher supply paths. I was like, nope, that's not true at all. It might be true for connected TV or certain special formats, but on the web and in app, so the amount of reselling is enormous, like more than half. And I think that was a big surprise. I made me feel like, okay, there's a lot of work to be done here. We should probably focus on reselling. And then the other one, which we knew, but now we know with better data, is just how common it is for a single exchange to be integrated multiple times with one publisher. Usually it's one integration through Prebid, one through Amazon TAM, and one through Google Open Bidding. But I don't think we really appreciated just how common that was until we started to see sellers.json data.
All right, so I want to tackle these in reverse order because I think that's super, it is always interesting to me when something is incredibly common to either the buy side or the sell side, but is very uncommon knowledge to the other. Because it feels like, whoa, how are we in the same industry? How are we on two sides of this? And like not even at all aware of it. It was like the first time I found out that the default buyer action was to just click the select all exchanges button when they were building their tactics. To me, blew my mind. I was like, there's no way you're actually doing that. Turns out, I mean, and this is less than 12 months ago, top buyers that, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars, that's their tactic. That's what they're doing. Blew my mind. Like I was in the meeting texting with other top publishers. We were joking about this possibility. And then literally the next slide up was that. So on the same coin, on the same trend, the fact that like it is so surprising to buyers that publishers integrate the same, like there are, and I'm not going to name them, certain exchanges that are just like, yeah, throw us wherever, like as many places as you want. And like as a publisher and as a yield person, and also as someone who's like vocal, I know that it's probably not good, but I think I've deluded myself into believing it's like the equivalent of not paying for a parking ticket in a city I'm never returning to. Like it's not actually that big a deal.
Well, okay. I mean, I hope this is a good idea for both of you guys. Like, what do those exchanges say to you? Like, why do they say you should integrate them through Prebid and TAM and Open Bidding?
It's not that you should, at least it's just you can. And like, it's the kind of thing where it's like, you can, and like, if you see more money, great. That is how the exchange talks to us about it. They're like,
And
some
is it like
publishers
common wisdom on the sell side of the market that like you will see more money if you integrate and exchange 3 times?
There's no cost to doing it. There's very little cost to like trying it.
Right.
So it's the kind of thing
Right.
where it's like, I can choose to pick up that dollar on the street or not. So it just feels, it almost feels like you're not doing the maximum yield thing by not doing that. And there are times where there is one exchange that I'm thinking of that may or may not be visible currently on the screen right now, that is very much against this practice. And it can sometimes work against them, because if you're looking at the total revenue produced per exchange, when you only have one path, there's just less of a chance. So yeah, it is perverse, that incentive.
Yeah, I was going to add real quick too, because I think I think right now we're starting to see this need to sort of shape and reduce the amount of opportunities, right? In so many different ways. And I think that question, Chris, like kind of the why, originally was sort of predicated on like choice, and mainly choice for buyers, paths, ways to be able to connect to supply, right? So there's a number of different reasons why, and I think your research has been groundbreaking to help illuminate a very, very complex process from buy and sell and all the sort of connected pieces in the middle. But what happened, rewind 24 months, 36 months ago, was taking your inventory and giving a buyer the choice to be able to figure out how to hook in that made most sense, for them. And in turn, there was a period where buyers said, hey, I will absolutely pay you a whole lot more to be able to understand where it's going and how it's happening. But then what happened is all of that started to multiply excessively, right? So now we're getting back to this sort of needing to condense and sort of shrink that, if you will.
Well, and
Does
as
that
a
make sense?
publisher, I've convinced myself that as long as it's a direct path, going back to your reseller comment, that there can't be as much wrong with that. So if I just have 3 direct paths with an exchange, that's way better than me having 1 direct and 2 resellers. At least that's what I've told myself. I don't actually know if that's true, but like there's sort of this 1990s like fat-free versus, or low fat versus regular moment where we're just like, well, as long as it's not fat, then I'm good. And as I'm saying it, like I can see like this is probably very flawed thinking, but like this was 24 months ago. It was just like, I just didn't want as many resellers in my ads.txt.
And I think it's interesting too, Chris, I wanted to get your perspective, because on the term, it's interesting, we have labels, right? So it's like reselling, and there's intermediaries, there's direct, there's both. And I think what's been interesting about your research is, as you described earlier, that with the reselling, there's actually a lot of valid reasons. And I think sometimes the name or the word actually brings a sort of negative connotation, with the word sort of reselling, when there's actually exclusive opportunities, direct opportunities, Ryan, like you just pointed out, right? I mean, the word reselling has kind of this nasty sort of association with it, because it's almost like there's a bad form of trying to resell in the market, when most of the connected middle is actually a reseller of some sort, right? So if you are an intermediary or reseller, of some sort, you can still bring a lot of value to your partner. And I wanted to talk to you about your research there, because you pointed out in several different ways in the Marketer's Guide to Reselling.
I was going to say your very first big PDF was the little black book. And then to me, and I'm sure in your head, you can catalog a million different PDFs you put out between that and the reseller one, but the reseller one is the one it's still on my desktop right now. Like it's a PDF that I will go back to, because I convinced myself that all reselling was bad. And so I kind of want to poke you. What is good reselling?
There's a lot of bad reselling. So like, I don't want that. I don't want to sort of like swing the message too far in the other direction either. But I think, the Ivy Tech Lab did this sort of amazing thing for the industry in rolling out standards for ads.txt. And there's like so much of those guys where I wasn't a part of the Ivy Tech Lab back then. I don't have the full history, but I mean, there was so much that those guys were trying to work through at the time, and they just had to make some choices. And so they decided to draw a line between accounts that are controlled by the publisher and accounts that aren't controlled by the publisher. And the things that aren't controlled by the publisher are called resellers. I interpreted that as meaning what I now call rebroadcasting, which is that Exchange A sends a bid request to Exchange B, who then sends that bid request to a DSP. And you could justify some of that, but you can't justify a lot of that. But it turns out there's fundamentally different things that also are accounts that are not controlled by the publisher. Like, for example, when you watch Discovery on Sling TV, and Discovery has the right of sale for certain inventory, that's like on a technicality a reseller because the publisher is Sling and they don't control Discovery's account. And so it's a reseller. It's like, well, no, it's not. And like anybody who thinks about this for 10 seconds would recognize that that's like not at all like rebroadcasting, but these things all get lumped under reselling. There's other variations too. Yeah. So anyway, I wrote this thing. We're sort of just trying to highlight, look, there is such a thing as valuable reselling or important reselling or whatever. And there is such a thing as value extracting reselling. And there's a lot of that value extracting reselling. And like as an industry, we got to shut that shit down. And as individual marketers, there need to be really thoughtful bidding strategies about how to shut off that wasteful reselling. But it would be a mistake to just push that button that I kind of can't believe some DSPs have even made to just stop responding to all bid requests that are marked as reselling.
Is that a common thing?
I like how you simplified the description or the action into sort of hops, right? I mean, it's like, when there's additional hops.
The main thing, like the shorthand for this whole thing is what matters is whether the company that gets paid by the exchange has full control of the ad serving decision. If that company is the publisher, then yes, the publisher has full control of the ad serving decision. If that company is Taboola has full control of the ad serving decision. If that company is Discovery on Sling TV, they have full control of the ad serving decision. If that company is Mediavine on some long tail publishers, not the publisher, but Mediavine controls the ad serving decision. And so like the key thing is your exchange paying the company that controls the final ad serving decision?
So are you guys able to catalog these differences between like rebroadcasters and resellers that are truly just like it almost seems like miscategorized direct?
Yes, but we're not perfect at it. We're good at it. And we're on our way to being perfect at it. But what we do through a variety of different data sources is build a catalog of every supply path that exists on the internet. So every website, every mobile app, every CTV app. We identify for every one of those properties which supply paths are authorized based on the publisher's ads.txt file. We identify who the exchange pays based on sellers.json file. And then we classify whether that supply path is a publisher direct supply path, whether it's paying into a proprietary placement, content syndication, outsourced field management, or what we call rebroadcasting, which is where this exchange pays another exchange who then goes on to pay some other company that controls the ad serving decision. And so we maintain this catalog. We update it once a day. It's got about 15 million supply paths in it. And it's the thing I was mentioning before, like investing in a data asset, that's the data asset. So we invest a lot in getting that data asset to be as accurate as possible. And then we think we can do smart things for marketers who want to buy smarter and publishers who want to sell smarter based on all those classifications.
And so for the buy smarter, is it, and I'm undoubtedly going to dumbly ask this, do you guys like sort of have a rank order of the cleanest versus dirtiest exchanges when it comes to paths? Like, is there like a Mendoza line here where you can't
think about, when we work with exchanges, one of the things that they, I think, like implicitly want is like, are we good or are we bad? Like how do we stack up relative to other exchanges? And like you can get at some of that, but like there's no such thing as like like saying like exchange A is great or terrible, like isn't useful information, because almost every exchange has like a huge diversity of supply paths. And then where this thing gets even more tricky is some supply paths are good for some marketers and bad for other marketers. Like a Google Exchange bid or Google Open Bidding integration, which adds extra fees, can actually be, well, it can be wasteful for some marketers because it adds extra fees, but it can actually be really valuable for other marketers because it has certain technical benefits. And so you get this really weird thing where there's not even such a thing as saying this is a path versus a B path. It like is highly dependent on what the marketer is trying to accomplish.
Very true. Yeah, very true.
So I'm super curious because we started this conversation with you saying that you have a pretty good grasp, again, not perfect, but like you have a good foothold in the buy side, being the people that know how to follow the money. And you feel like you can offer a similar thing to the publishers. What is that thing? Like as a publisher, my ears perk up a little when I hear that, because I'm just like, what is the thing that I don't know yet?
Okay, so here's the information you don't have, but I don't know exactly how you turn it into business value, to be really honest about it. The information I don't think you have is how your inventory is presented to the buy side. Like, I don't
would
think you have
love
great,
that information.
but what would you do with it? You know, like if we could show you, here are all of the supply paths that are sending bid requests to DSPs. Here's how they represent your inventory. Here is how DSPs respond to each of those bid requests, how often they respond, and how often they win at different price points. That is information like that we have that I know should be valuable to the sell side. And to some publishers who are just like really hungry for information and like crazy smart and just want to go explore this stuff, we've had success. We have a bunch of publishers who seem to get value from this. But you know, when we work with marketers, what we say is, we know the supply chain better than anybody. We're going to push a custom bidding rule, set of bidding rules into your DSP, and we're going to save you 10%. When we work with publishers, we say what I just said to you, but it's kind of up to the publisher to figure out like how do you turn that into business value?
Right. Yeah, I feel like that it's got to be a different model, just because you probably can't guarantee a % lift, basically.
Right.
So like it's much more of a tech service or a tech fee when it comes to, because it's information and it could be very useful information. I personally think it is, but like it's information that I can't immediately turn into money. I need to do a couple steps and a couple different translations before I turn it into money.
I mean, I think there's another side to that value, or just there's another way value is represented there, because it's extremely difficult for publishers, first of all, to be able to extract, you know, that and turn it into actionable insights that their already existing teams may be able to use to go have meaningful discussions that actually make sense, you know, for a buyer. I think it's extremely frustrating for a buyer to set aside meeting and talk to someone who can't actually have a discussion around things that sort of matter, you know, to them, which is going to be a lot of what is extracted, you know, in those insights. And I think there's a lot of value there.
Well, you know, Ryan, I think you were saying this before. There is weird, there's just like not sufficient information sharing between the two sides of the market. There are some things that you can't believe the buyers don't know, and the buyers can't believe publishers don't know, right?
Absolutely.
As we've started to work with publishers, we're realizing there are a lot of those things. Like, for example, one of the things we know is on many publishers, most bids go to some sort of resold inventory. It could be the rebroadcasting type of reselling, but more often than not, it's proprietary placements. Like a huge amount of bidding goes into those proprietary placements resellers, which is something like buyers are accustomed to and they're starting to learn how to navigate. But I've been surprised by how surprised sellers are when they see that. You know, like when I show a pie chart to a publisher and say, oh yeah, 60, like what's normal is like 60 to 70% of bids go to placements that you don't control. There are placements that are outsourced to other companies. And about 30, 40, maybe 50% of bids go to placements that you guys control. That's surprising to publishers. Like that's not surprising to me, but I don't think a lot of publishers recognize that that's how their inventory gets treated on the buy side.
Is this
Right.
sort of regardless of ads.txt setups? Like, is it?
These are all authorized supply paths, but it's resellers of companies who have exclusive right of sale for native units on your page, or a proprietary video player, or something along those lines. Where that becomes especially interesting, I think, is, I'm not a publisher, so I don't really know if this line of logic makes any sense, but as I understand it, publishers have placements that they control. There'll be video placements, banner placements, native placements, but they're ones that they control. And when DSPs bid more, publishers make more money, and when DSPs bid less, publishers make less money. But then there's other placements that are transacted with the publisher on a fixed fee basis, like some kind of like an RPM model. And it really doesn't make a difference to a publisher whether that inventory monetizes well or not. Publisher's getting the same amount of money for every page view from that partner. When that happens, the publisher is actually disincentivized to allow that company to send out bid requests to DSPs. Because all that does is help that company improve their yield by cannibalizing bids that go to the publisher-controlled ad units. And there's this very odd dynamic here that, like, you have this partner who pays you on an RPM basis. They're asking you to add entries to your ads.txt file, but every time you add one of those ads.txt entries, it dilutes the amount of DSP bids that go into your directly monetized supply paths.
Interesting.
Are there publishers sophisticated enough to be thinking that through? I'm against the notion of the RPM deal. Like, I totally understand it, because there's the difference between like yield people that are a degree separated from like total revenue and like basically that are insulated enough from the end user that they don't actually care if it pollutes the user experience, who love RPM deals, because yes, you can put them in your low viewability, low value ad units and make a shit ton of money. But like anyone who then thinks one step further is going, I wonder how that person makes money, it's probably screwing me over, is like the next level of thinking. Like, there's no way that that company is making more money than the rest of the market and making margin, and like I'm just pulling the wool over their eyes. Like, they know what they're doing. They signed this deal. They fully like in a very rare case, they do it on a thin margin because they know that your logo in their pitch deck is worth it. But otherwise, they're screwing you one other way.
I think you're right in some cases, but there are totally legitimate versions of this, particularly in the app world. Like, it's really common in the app world for an app developer to get a big fat check from some company who has a huge pool of proprietary demand, like an ad network, huge pool of proprietary demand. They're not tapping into DSP demand at all. And they just want to lock up exclusive access to a video interstitial, or something along those lines, a rewarded video.
I was going to say reward video sounds like prime.
They're bringing their own, they have a huge sales force. They're bringing their own demand. Like, your thing exists and my thing exists. And it's real hard, I think, for a publisher to know which, what's what when a deal shows up on their desk.
All right. To not take too much of of your time on what is this, Wednesday night? I'm so curious, because whenever I get to talk to a person that's like super close to the crystal ball, like you get to see just like raw data from a variety of sources that very few people get to see, in a way that like you guys are analyzing it in a way that is pretty unique, and not a lot of people are looking at it that way. And again, your investment in your data asset of being able to match all this. So like, based on the trends you see on the buy side, and like in your early conversations with publishers, like where is this SPO conversation going? Like, if I want to consider myself a cutting edge top 10% publisher, and I know I have a few exchanges with 3 or 4 paths, should I start cutting those now, or should I wait until I see a wave coming later? Like, what? Yeah. So what are the smart people? What in a betting world, what are the sharps doing? Like,
you were saying something before that we should come back to. You have no cost at the moment, at least, for loading up the market with duplicate auctions for the same impression. You have only upside in the short term. Your revenue tomorrow is going to be bigger if you run that extra auction. And like at the core of it, it's bad incentives. Like the DSPs reward that behavior. They would never say that on a panel. Like they don't want to reward that behavior, and they're all working to sort of retool their system so they don't reward it, but they do right now. And there's this weird thing where the publishers who are the most aggressive and the least apologetic about running an insane ad tech stack are making the most money. So until the buy side stops rewarding auction duplication, you shouldn't stop creating auction duplication. And I don't really see a way for an individual publisher to sort of like unwind this thing, because like to the extent that that your decisions clean up the industry, you're going to get penalized for it. Like you need to be the messiest publisher, not the cleanest publisher. So we should talk loudly about this, and we should put pressure on the DSPs. But ultimately, it's the buy side that has to change the incentives for the supply chain to get cleaned up. What I think is maybe a pathway to getting there is large individual marketers or large agencies through supply path optimization can start to create better incentives. Marketers are doing supply path optimization because it helps their economics. But what hopefully happens here is like enough marketers with enough buying power start to starve, stupid, wasteful reselling, start to focus their bidding on high efficiency direct to publisher supply paths, and really change the incentives for publishers to stop focusing on creating, triple integrations with each exchange, and instead create extremely efficient access points to their inventory. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We're a year, 2 years away from that.
I said it was last question, but then you made me think of one more. What do you think of the trade desks? I just keep calling it brute force deduplication, but like they're forcing exchanges to pick a single path. Now I heard about this a couple of months ago, but essentially the trade desk told every exchange, you pick a path. And I don't know if it's per publisher. I don't know if it's just like overall you get one path. And so whether it's pre-bid or TAM or OB, what do you think of that effort? And do you think, is that just a PR thing, or like, is there something there? Is there a value add there for the trade desk?
Not a PR thing. I think trade desk is recognizing that they need to in some way create incentives for publishers to create efficient access points to their inventory rather than just like jamming them for duplicate auctions. My guess is that what they just did was sort of one step in what will be like a many-step process of finding efficient access points to each publisher. And I think, now I'm speaking way out of turn, but my guess, and I think this is the right way to do it, is that smart DSPs, trade desk is certainly on that list, are going to recognize that they can't independently make that decision. They don't, just like I was saying before, like I don't really understand the sell side, neither does trade desk, neither does DV360. Like the buy side doesn't really understand the sell side and can't. Like we can't possibly really understand the nuance of how every publisher sets up their ad tech stack. And so we on the buy side need information from the sell side to inform where we bid. Like the basic idea would be, hey, I get 10,000 QPS from you every day. It really is only 1,000 ads per second. I'm getting 10,000 QPS. Let's get it down to 1,000. I'll send you back just as many bid responses tomorrow as I am today. But just send me 1,000 QPS from the most efficient access point. Like that's what we need to get to. I think trade desk is like trying to put the decision-making power on the sell side to inform where they send their bids.
Chris, that's a great point, and I guess with your research, you've done a really good job of making those complex, sort of paths and understandings very easy to understand, or at least a whole lot easier to understand. Where's your research sort of lacking? Like where could you use help? I think from all that you do, like where does that next step sort of come from? Is it the publisher side, or how does that work? And where can both Ryan, who's a tremendous media brand, on his own, and a company like mine, which, is, a direct, path into inventory as you described before, but is an intermediary, but that direct path. Where can you find help from the supply side to help your research?
Well, let me just sort of clarify what we know. We know anything that's public, right? We know ad specs, data, sellers.json. So we have a good sense of like the supply landscape, what exists. We also have a really good sense of the performance that marketers achieve when they bid into certain supply paths, because we work with so many marketers and so many DSPs, and we have this incredibly diverse data set that describes what marketers get when they bid. But there's this really key thing, there's really two key things that we're missing. One is we don't know how much supply exists. The DSPs are the only companies in the space who know that. Like, without access to the bid stream, which only a DSP would have, you don't actually have any understanding of the volume of opportunities that exist through each supply path. You only know what the DSP allows you to participate in. And so we need to be working more closely with DSPs to close that knowledge gap. And then the other thing sounds so simple and is the number one unsolved thing in supply path optimization. Nobody knows whether two supply paths sell the same thing. And the whole purpose of SPO is to be able to duplicate things. But if I have two supply paths and I'm going to turn off one of them, I need to feel really confident that the path that remains has full access to the inventory, and that when I shut off path B, I didn't lose inventory access. No one has that documentation. It's crazy. This is one of the things that seems like it should have been solved years ago and just still isn't. Like, even at a basic level, like, does path A and path B, do they sell the same placement? That information isn't communicated to anybody on the buy side. Only the publisher knows that. And I think that's, thinking about like, what could publishers be doing here? That's the main thing that publishers should be trying to signal to the buy side.
I can tell you, because I feel like I deal with this all the time, even when I think two paths are supposed to be seeing the same thing, that may not always be true. When I talk about my AMP inventory or my O&O inventory, to me, that's all O&O, because that's my shit. But the technical integrations and the technical limitations of one, and because a very large search engine gives one a lot of extra juice, those paths aren't the same. They don't act the same. The inventory may look the exact same, but it's not. So it's an incredibly complicated web of both. There is a lack of documentation, but there's like my own exchanges that I work with and talk to at least every week, sometimes every day. They don't know if they're seeing the same thing between two different paths. So
play that out into like then how it like manifests for buyers and sellers. Right now, there's very round numbers like 10x auction duplication. And so because of what you just said, we need to be really cautious when we work with marketers in making sure that we don't take a publisher from 10 paths down to one, because we are going to lose inventory access if we do that. And so what we need to do is just be like we need to like sort of gradually start away. Maybe we'll go from like 10 paths down to 8. We're going to find the 2 worst paths and shut them off. And even doing that is saving marketers like 10% cost. But if we could get more organized as an industry, and by the way, presumably that results in publishers making more money as well, because they're transacting through lower fee paths. If we could get more organized as an industry and have more confidence that I could go from 8 now down to 4 or 2, we could really start to push money through more efficient supply paths that let the marketer pay less while also having the publisher get more out the other side of that pipe. But we just can't do that until there's better data coming from publishers to help marketers bid with confidence through a smaller number of paths.
Yeah, and maybe that's the last layer of this, is understanding the difference in the technical integration for each path type, because that will ultimately decide. Like, maybe you need one of each path type flavor, one TAM, one pre-bid, one OB. I would love to keep this conversation going further, but I try to hit a hard limit on how long these podcasts go. I want to talk third-party cookies with you in the buyer perspective. There's a lot. Erik and I have been chatting back and forth, trying to figure out all the things. But It's great to pick your brain, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you for taking this time. Cheers.
Thank you guys.
Cheers.
Good to be here.
Thanks
right.
very much, Chris. Thanks.
Thank
ya.
you. Bye.
All righty.
Bye guys.